everyone. Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the Menendez brothers' Path to Freedom. And in this episode, it's going to be a brief episode, but we're going to go over kind of like a tutorial and some guidelines on how to write letters in support of the brothers to the parole board. So let's get started. I woke up this morning, just FYI, I woke up this morning migrainey, so no 1996 transcript read through for today, unfortunately, but I did want to bring you this because I did promise it previously, and then I'm like, I'll just do a separate video. So here we go. I went to Grok. I love Grok. If you guys don't use Grok, let me make this a little bigger. You should. Okay, so I just said, how can I write to the parole board to write letters in support of Erik and Lyle Menendez's release? Here is what Grok says, and there's going to be some good guidelines and tips. So, writing a letter to the parole board in support of Erik and Lyle Menendez's release requires a thoughtful, respectful, and well structured approach. Below are steps and guidelines to help you craft an effective letter based on general best practices for parole board letters and specific context from the Menendez case. Note that while I can provide guidance, the content of your letter should reflect your genuine perspective and any personal connection or reasoning that you have for supporting their release. So make it personal is a really good way to make a powerful letter to the board. So here's the key information you need for writing the parole board. The parole board address. All letters should be sent to the California Board of Parole Hearings. The address, you can keep that on the screen for a minute, but I will read through it as well. You guys, uh, uh, I don't know what I was going to say. Never mind. Okay, so here is how it should be addressed. Your letters, or your envelopes should be to the Board of Parole Hearings, P.O. Box 4036, Sacramento, California 95812 4036. The envelope should also clearly state letter of support and include the inmates' names and numbers. Be warned, you need to address separate letters for each brother. So if you're going to do this, you need to write a letter separate for Lyle and a letter separate for Erik. They have separate files, separate cases, separate everything. So you need to do it separately. So just be forewarned, you will need to do two letters. All right, so here are their inmate numbers. So and make sure that you use their full legal name, which is Joseph Lyle Menendez, K13758. Or you have Erik Galen Menendez, K14101. Again, two separate letters. All right. Parole hearing dates. The Menendez brothers' initial parole suitability hearings are scheduled for August 21st and 22nd. Ensure your letter is submitted well in advance to allow processing time. We're about like 80 something days away, I want to say. So we have time to get these letters in. The purpose of your letter should advocate for the brothers' release by highlighting their rehabilitation, remorse, contributions in prison, and why they no longer pose a risk to society. It should also address the context of their case, such as the alleged abuse they suffered, which has been a significant factor in their resentencing and public support. So those are some things that you can talk about. Steps to write an effective support letter. Format the letter properly. Use a professional business letter format. Include your full name, address, and contact information at the top. The address, or you should address the letter to either the honorable members of the Board of Parole Hearings or Dear Board of Parole Hearings. Either one's acceptable. Include the inmate's name and number. So like regarding, and I did an image for you on the thumbnail here just so you can kind of see. I kind of wrote something up. That's what your letter might. First of all, you might want to put your address at the top. But then you would do the board of parole hearings, and then you would, for whichever letter you're doing, for Lyle's letter, you would put regarding Joseph Lyle Menendez and his number, and for Erik, you would do the same for his. All right, so that works well. Okay. So then you're going to introduce yourself, briefly state who you are regarding relating to the Menendez brothers. Oh, here, let me switch back. Sorry. So you're going to introduce yourself, briefly state who you are. Are you a concerned citizen, an advocate, a family friend, or someone that's familiar with the case? Maybe you just, you've been following it since the 90s, like I have. I'm also an advocate for victims. So, that's probably how I would start my letter. If you have a personal connection to the brothers, their family, or the case, make sure that you mention it. Say, I have followed the Menendez case for years and I believe in their rehabilitation. I mean, for example. But you can use that line as well. Take it from Grok. If you have relevant expertise in psychology, criminal justice, victim advocacy, note that to give your letter a little bit more credibility. Acknowledgement of the crime. So recognize the severity of the crime to show respect for the victims and the judicial process. For example, I understand the gravity of the crimes committed by Lyle and Erik Menendez in 1989, and I acknowledge the profound loss suffered by their family and community. You want to avoid minimizing the crime or blaming the victims. Like, don't say Jose and Kitty had it coming for everything that they did. Like, don't do that. Even if you think that, don't do that. That's fine if you think it, but don't write it in their rehabilitation letter or resentencing letter. Sorry. Um, or parole, I guess, would be what they're going for. Parole. All right, so avoid minimizing the crime. This could undermine your credibility if you do, say, Kitty and Jose had it coming, whatever. Highlight rehabilitation and positive contributions. So I have gone over, it's also provided in I will provide a link in the description of this video for their resentencing the resentencing motion where you can go through and look at the things that Erik and Lyle have done while they've been incarcerated for the good. So emphasize the brothers' efforts to rehabilitate themselves over the 35 years of incarceration. Examples from available information include Lyle founded the Green Space Project in 2018, raising over $250,000 to transform the prison yard at Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility, improving the environment for inmates. Erik Menendez serves on the prison muralist team and has participated in programs supporting disabled and elderly inmates. He also learned sign language while he was in prison so he could talk to the deaf inmates. Both brothers have been involved in mentorship, meditation classes, and support groups with minimal disciplinary infractions. Erik has 7 minor infractions over 34 years. Note their exemplary behavior as supported by letters from corrections officials and former inmates, which influenced Judge Michael Jessick's decision to resentence them to 50 years to life in May 2025, so of this month, making them parole eligible. You want to address remorse and responsibility. Remember, Nathan Huckman always said that, they weren't remorseful or didn't take accountability for their actions, but we know that they have. So if you follow this case like I have. So highlight that both brothers have taken responsibility for their actions during their resentencing hearing on May 13th. They expressed deep remorse. Lyle stated, quote, I killed my mom and dad. I make no excuses and also no justifications, acknowledging the unfathomable impact on their family. Erik said, quote, I committed an atrocious act against two people who had every right to live and expressed a commitment to make a difference inside or outside prison. mention their expressed desire to serve sexual abuse victims if released, showing a commitment to positive contributions. I think that they will do fantastic things outside of prison. If they have more resources available to them, they're going to be even greater at being advocates for healing and um, acknowledgement of sexual abuse that happens and the effects of it. All right, so next you might want to discuss the context of the crime, reference the alleged sexual, emotional, and physical abuse the brothers endured, which has gained renewed attention and support due to new evidence. A 1988 letter from Erik to his cousin Andy Cano, discovered in recent years, detailed ongoing abuse by their father, Jose Menendez. So, actually, speaking of this next portion here, Roy Rosello, before I read that, Roy Rossello, as we know, former member of the band Menudo. He was abused by Jose. He was also very severely abused by the manager of Menudo. And tonight, I have scheduled on my channel, 7 p.m. Central, a full deep dive into the Roy Rosello versus Diaz case. So, Edgardo Diaz, who was the manager of Menudo, he created Menudo. We go into the whole thing. We read a 17-page document. I kind of put together like a whole video with like slides and pictures. So, hopefully, you guys like that. So, it kind of goes through the history of Roy and the abuse that he suffered by both Jose and Edgardo. All right, so Roy Rosello, a former Menudo member, alleged in 2023 that Jose Menendez raped him. I'm just saying words now. I don't even care anymore on this channel. So Jose did that to him in the 1980s, corroborating claims of Jose's abusive behavior. So, again, check out my deep dive into Roy Rosello's case. I really wanted to do something just specifically for him because I feel like not that he gets overlooked in this case, but that I want as much advocacy for him as there is for the Menendez, the Menendez brothers. All right, so note that societal understanding of male sexual abuse has evolved since the 1990s. Make sure, say, if they were sisters, they would probably be out by now. Or, you don't have to say that, but you could say things like how it wasn't fully understood about the effects of sexual abuse, especially male on male, back in the 90s. And that is part of that. You might also want to remind the parole board that the claims that the brothers had about the sexual abuse of their father didn't come in as much in the second trial. They were limited, and a lot of key evidence and key witnesses were excluded. You could frame their actions as a response to the lifetime of trauma, supporting their argument for imperfect self defense, which could have led to a manslaughter conviction. So, if you're not aware, the first trial they had the imperfect self defense on the table, and the jury was split and couldn't come to a verdict for both of them. Basically the females were like manslaughter. Yeah, let's do this imperfect self defense. It's manslaughter. And all the men were like, no, no, it's murder, first degree. So that's how the first trial ended. Second trial, they were not allowed to even use the imperfect, it's called imperfect self defense because it was done in self-defense, but it's imperfect because to you and I who are looking at it from outside in, it seems like a very imperfect crime. But to the people who are in the crime and reacting out of trauma and fear, it makes sense to them in the moment. They were fearful that their parents were going to take their lives in that moment. It doesn't have to make sense to us. We don't have to understand that, but that is how they were feeling at the moment. So that is the imperfect self defense, just so you are aware. and they weren't allowed to argue that in the second trial. So that could have given them the conviction of manslaughter had they been able to argue that potentially again in the second trial, and that wasn't unfortunately the case. All right, so you can to argue for their release, you can state why you believe the brothers no longer pose a risk to society. For example, after 35 years of incarceration, Lyle and Erik have demonstrated remarkable rehabilitation, remorse, and commitment to helping others, as evidenced by their prison programs and support for correctional officials. Or you could say their moderate risk assessment, as noted in the parole board's review, should be weighed against their extensive positive contributions and the context of their trauma. The risk assessment came out to be they were moderate, but it, altogether, like their general assessment is low. So I don't know why there's two separate assessment scores, but that's what they have. So just the risk assessment that came out for the parole board's review that came out as moderate for some reason, or something on there came out as moderate. I don't know. I don't know the specifics. Anyways, mention the support of over 20 family members, including cousins like Anna Maria Baralt, who has testified to their transformation and the family's desire for their release. You could highlight that their resentencing to 50 years to life reflects judicial recognition of their rehabilitation and the need to reconsider their original life without parole sentences. These are some really good tips to include in your letters if you do write letters. Remember, that's plural. Don't forget to write separate letters for the brothers. It is imperative. All right, so close respectfully, politely urge the parole board to grant parole, emphasizing fairness and compassion. For example, I respectfully request that the Board of Parole hearings consider Lyle and Erik Menendez's rehabilitation, remorse, and context of their case in granting them parole, allowing them to contribute positively to society. Thank the board for their time and consideration. Sign the letter with your full name and, if applicable, your title or affiliation. If you're a psychologist and you have your own, business or whatever, wherever you're affiliated, something, along those lines. If you're just an average citizen, you don't need to apply that. Optional, use a template. There was a template going around and I did click on it, but it's for Judge Jessic. It's for the letter. There was like a template that was going around for if you wanted to send in a letter on behalf of the brothers for the resentencing hearing to Judge Jessic, which you don't need to do anymore, so I'm going to skip that part. Some other tips for success: be sincere and specific, avoid general language, share why you personally support their release, whether due to their rehabilitation, the abuse context, or other reasons. Keep it concise, aim for 1 to 2 pages, focusing on key points like rehabilitation, remorse, and abuse. Avoid confrontational language. Don't criticize the judicial system, prosecutors, or victims. Focus on positive reasons for parole. So don't say Nathan Hochman is a tool in your letter, which is probably how I would want to start it, but I'm not going to. Submit early. Send your letter at least 4 to 6 weeks before August 2025 hearings to ensure that it's processed. Check with the Board of Parole hearings for any specific deadlines. I don't know of any. Follow guidelines. Confirm submission requirements with the Board of Parole hearings. Physical mail only, no email. So you have to mail it. You can also contact them at 916-445-4072 or check their website for instructions. And that's pretty much, I'm not going to read the rest of that. Here is a sample letter outline. You would do your name, address, city, zip, city, state, zip, email, phone number, because you want to make sure that you've got your contact information, a date, Board of Parole. Dear honorable members, you know what? I'll put this in a Google document and share it for you guys. So you'll have that too in the link below. So you can use this. And this is a sample letter, but make sure that you make it personal and put your own spin on it. So I'll put that in a Google Doc for you guys. Um, Final notes. Verify the submission details. Contact the Board of Parole Hearings to confirm any specific requirements for support letters. I don't think that there are any. Stay other than make it separate, put that information on there. Stay informed, follow updates on the case through reliable sources or advocacy groups like Justice for Erik and Lyle.org. And then be respectful. The board, the parole board will review many letters, so clarity, professionalism, and sincerity are crucial. So there you have it. Those are some really good tips. I love Grok. I'm going to thank, or at least like Grok's answer because that was a good answer and it gave us a sample outline. And I will share that with you guys. And hopefully, you guys get started on your letters and get them sent out early because we only have about 80 days left. So we got to get them out. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye now.